Hey everyone, trust you're doing fine. In today's tutorial, I'll show you how to design two of the most essential UI components in Figma, which are buttons and input fields. These are the building blocks of any great UI design. So let's jump right in. Welcome back to my channel. Stella the designer. Alright, for today we'll be learning how to create buttons and input fields components. So to get started, you would first have to create the area you would be designing in. So let's click on the frame and map out an area. So this is it. So for this particular frame, I would want to change the color. This is white, so I would want to change the color to something not so bright as white. So this works for me. Nice. So the next thing to do now is to go to my text tool. Click on the text tool and click into the frame. Click into the frame. So I would want to type out the text I want to be in my button. So we can go with buy now, get started, but for this tutorial I would go with button. So let's go with button since that is what we are creating. Okay, so we have this button. So if you see, remember I said when you have an object, you can edit the object from the properties panel. So in case I want to change any property of this text object, I can just go here. This is the font, the type weight, the size. I can make any changes here. This is even the color. I can edit the color, but for now I am okay with what I have. So then I would proceed to add an auto layout to this text object. To do that, I can either right click and then go down to the add auto layout option, and then click on it and auto layout will be added automatically. Or I can use the shortcut of shift plus A. So once I press down my shift key and tap on the A button, the auto layout gets added automatically. Okay, so let's click this to add an auto layout. Clicking this, we have an auto layout here already. Okay, so what to do next is to add a fill color to this button. How do you do that? You go back again to your properties panel. Ensure that the object is selected. As it is now, it is not selected. That is why from the properties panel, there's nothing to edit. So make sure that your object is selected. So now that it is selected, I'll go to the fill property. You can see, and then add a fill to it. Once you hover on this plus sign, you'll see add fill. So now I have added a white color to it. This is the default color that is always added, and then you can proceed to edit it by clicking here and choosing any other color you would want. Okay, so for now let's leave it at this. So still keeping the objects selected, you go to where you have the auto layout. Let's edit this auto layout setting. Keep the resizing, the width and height property to hug content. That means you want the button to hug you want the auto layout to hug whatever content is in it. Okay, so keep it at that. Then the direction of your auto layout, this is the vertical, horizontal, and wrap. Let's keep it at horizontal. We want the object to be in the horizontal direction. For the alignment, we always want this object, which is the button text, to be at the center of the auto layout. Okay, now since it is only one object we have in this auto layout, the margin property does not really, or the horizontal gap between objects does not really matter. The value there does not really matter because we only have one object in there. Okay, I would want that space to be 16 on each side. Okay, now the vertical padding is the space up and down of the object. Horizontal padding is the space left and right. Okay, left to right of the object. Okay, so for the vertical padding, I would want this to be 12. All right, now we have our button, but there's one more thing. This button takes the shape of a rectangle, and you can see that the edges are really sharp. Okay, I don't want that for this button. So how do I edit this? I would go to the appearance section, and then under the appearance section there's a feature called corner radius. Okay, so for this corner radius, you can use it to round the edges of an object. Okay, so for this, I would want to give this a value of 4. Once I click on enter, you can see that this button has rounded edges now. Okay, if I want it to be rounder, let me duplicate this. If I want this to be rounder, I can just increase the value. Let's make it 30. You can see that I have a more rounded button. So the more value you give the corner radius, the more rounded your object would be. Okay, so we have this. So let's continue. Now for my button, I don't want a white button. I want to change the color to something blue. So I go here and edit the color. Okay, so this works for me. And because I want the text in this button to be very visible, I will change it from the black color that it is. Okay, so to change it, select the text, go to the fill here, and let me select a lighter color for it. Nice. So this is okay. So this is my button. As easy as ABCD. Okay, now that I have this button, I want to create various versions of this button, because when designing, you may need an inactive button, you may need a hover button, you know. So, and you don't have to start creating the button anytime you need to. You have to use a button in another different state. Okay, how do you then go about this? What you do is you make this particular one you have created a component. You make it a component, and then it is only after you have made it a component that you can then have various versions of it. So how do you go about this? Go again to the properties panel, just to the right of where you have this title here. There is a shape that looks like a diamond. When you hover on it, you would see create component. Click on it. You have successfully made this a component. Okay, now when this is made a component, another thing it means is that you can reuse it. How do you reuse it? So you go to your assets. You would see that this is a component that you have created. All you have to do is just click, hold, and drag into your frame, and you would have it anytime you want to use it. You can see I now have 3 buttons, I have 4 buttons, I have 5 buttons. So all of these buttons are instances of the parent button, or they are children of the parent button. Okay, so whatever you do to this parent button automatically will affect these children. Let's try it out. Let's change the color of this parent button. Let's make it black. Can you see? Can you see? You can see what's happening. So once the parent button, any property that once the parent button property is changed, it affects the children, as long as it is a component. Okay, so let's take it all the way back. Now we have created a component, and where can you find the instance? From the assets region. Okay, you can get reusable components. All right, so now let's continue editing this, our parent component. We need different versions of this button. What do? You create a variant. So go again to where you have this frame title here. Go again there, click on the add variant. You see, you now have a different version of this. Now you can edit it. So for this one, I want it to be the inactive state of our main button. What do? For this, I would go to the color property area again. Let me select this one as my inactive state. Okay, then for the text, let me go with something a bit darker so it can contrast more. Okay, so let me just do this. Okay, then let's see. So we have 2 versions now. This is the inactive state of this button. Okay, so to add variants again, I can click here, okay, to add more variants. So let me click here again. Now I want to do the hover button. Okay, so again I'll go to the color property here. Let me just do this. So while hovering, I want this button to look this way, and for the text I want it to look this way. Nice. So yes, this is it. Now to keep everything clean and straightforward, always ensure that you label whatever you are doing. Okay, so when we select this entire component, what we'll do is we go to this particular area and change it to what? Buttons. We are working on what? Buttons. Okay, sorry, I didn't spell that right. Buttons, yes. So we are working on buttons, and for these buttons we have different states. For now, this is called the default state. For now, this is called the variant 2 and variant 3. Let's change it. So for this, I want to call this my active button. Okay, and then I want to call this my inactive button, and lastly I want to call this my hover button. Okay, now what is the use of all this, you may ask? So let's say I am designing and I need an inactive button. If I do not have a component, and if I do not have variants of my main button, it means I'll start designing the button again from the beginning, and make the color to look like one that's would make the button look disabled. Okay, but if I have done all of this, all what I need to do is just go to the assets region, click, hold and drag my main button to my frame. Okay, now go to this area where you have made your components, your button component. They will tell you that, oh, this particular button you have is the active button. So clicking down on this drop down menu, you can choose if you now want to use the inactive, okay, or if you want to use the hover button, or if you still want to use the active button. So you don't need to design every time when you need any of the states of the button. Okay, so it makes your workflow a lot faster, a whole lot faster. Now if you want to take it another step, you can add interactions. Okay, so this is not me teaching prototyping, but if you know how to prototype, this is like an extra for you, right? So you just have to, let's say, click on the inactive button, go to your prototype feature. Okay, now from inactive, I want, when people hover on this inactive button, I want it to bring up the hover button, the hover effect. Okay, so for the trigger, I'll say while hovering, change to the hover button, and how fast, make it instant. Okay, nice. Now for this hover button, if they now decide to click, I want it to go to the active state. So on click, change to active, and how fast do you want it? Very instant. All right, so or rather instant. So let's see how this works. Okay, let's see how this works. Let me have a file here. Okay, now let me create an instance here, and let's view this, how it works. Okay, so for this, let me first change it to the inactive state. Okay, because that is where we started our prototyping from. All right, so this is it. Now watch, when I hover, it has changed to the hover state, and when I click, it is now the active state. You see how easy it is? So this is how creating a button, making it a component, creating various versions of the button, and then adding interactions to it. This is how it can make your design process a whole lot easy, okay, and very, very, very fast. So now that we know how to create buttons, let's look at, let me take this off. Let's look at how to create input fields. So to create input fields, you would first need to have a placeholder. What is a placeholder? A placeholder is a text, okay, explaining to the users what should be entered into that input field, okay? So to create a placeholder, you first have to go to the text tool, click here to type a text. So let's say for this placeholder, let's say enter email address. All right. So for this placeholder, let's edit the size of this font to be 14, and I don't want the weight to be semi-bold. Let me make it regular. Okay, and then I can further edit this. I want the color to be very, very light, so let me do this. Okay, now same thing, let's then add our auto layout. Okay, this is us adding an auto layout. Okay, so for this particular auto layout, I would want the padding to be 16, the horizontal and vertical padding to be 16. So yes, I have done this. And then I would want this object, okay, to fill the container. So what this means is that when I resize it, I want it to fill. Okay, yes, so I want to be able to manually resize this. Okay, now for the object, I don't want it to be at the middle. I don't want it to be at the middle. I want it to be to the side. Okay, all right, so okay, all right, so what do we do next? We would add our stroke property, okay, to this. So let's add stroke, and I want the stroke to be outside. I want the weight of the stroke to be 0.75 pixels. Okay, and also for the stroke, I want it to be really light. So this is me editing the stroke property. I want it to be very light. Okay, now what next can we do? We can work on the corner radius. So keep the object selected. Let's see the corner radius. Let's make it 10 and see how that looks. Okay, I think this looks good. Now I can increase the width, manually increase the width of this input button. And there we have it. We have just successfully created an input field. And like I mentioned, this particular input field can also have different states. Okay, all we have to do is click on it, follow the step, make it a component first, and now you can then add variants. Okay, so for this particular variant, now let's say I want this to be the default state, and let's just do a default and hover state. Okay, so for the hover state, I want the stroke property, I want the color to be blue. I want the color to be this, to show that we are hovering. Okay, let me go deeper so that it will be more prominent. Okay, all right, so let's go again. So what property is this? Property 1. No, we are dealing with an input field. Okay, we are dealing with an input field, and this one now is not the default. Let me say okay, we can say default state. Yeah, we can leave it at default state. Okay, and this will then be the hover state. Okay, so let's still add an interaction. Okay, so when it's at the default state, let's go to the prototype feature. When it's at the default state, when I hover on it, I want it to change. While hovering, I want it to change. Okay, so that's that. So how do we apply this? Let's create another frame for you to see how this can be applied. Remember, these are your parent components. Do not touch them. Leave them where they are. If you need to use any of this, go to the assets. Okay, if you have the file, just go to this assets and you would see all the components that you have. So let's drag this in here. Let's make our frame. Okay, so this is it. You can then use this. So if you want it, although you may not, but if you would want to use the hover state and you click on it, it changes. You see? So it is very, very easy. Let's change this back to the default and see the interaction. So let's see a quick interaction of this. See, I am hovering, it changes. Hover, it changes. Remove. So this is just a quick way to make your input field and also different states of it. All right, so we have learned how to create buttons, how to create input fields, and then how to create various states of them and also add interactions between the states. And that's it. You have just learned how to create buttons and input field components and also how to prototype interactions to these components. So in our next tutorials, I'll be teaching you how to create checkboxes and radio buttons, and as a bonus, how to create 3D buttons. So if you have found this helpful, do not forget to like and subscribe. Also hit the notification bell so you are not left out. See you in the next one.